Conservatives' strength is also their biggest weakness, namely decentralization. The only way to overcome that is to be principally rooted in Christ. This is where the left finds its strength, not through Christ, but they are uniformly anti-Christ. This is the only thing that holds such divergent groups together. They are religiously motivated to the core. So here I am exercising my conservative chops by being Johnny come lately to the party and commenting on something after that something has already passed by the public's attention. Jason Aldean released a song a wee bit ago that got the libtards really distraught and worked up again, which really isn't that hard. The song is called Try That in a Small Town, and in typical conservative fashion, it's about 3 years too late. And again, in typical conservative fashion, what's said in this song is only being said now because it's now okay to say in conservative circles, because they've been pushed to that point based on discomfort and not on principle. What inspired me to finally listen to this song was actually a clip I saw on The View, where one of the intellectual standouts on the little yellow school bus, I'll let you decide which one, decried how horribly racist this song was. Given that the women on The View had their panties all wedged up about it, I couldn't help but listen to it. The funny thing is, the only thing racist about the song is that it exposes racists and idiots for calling it racist. For example, if you hear lines like, sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjack an old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool? Well, act like a fool if you like. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face. Stomp on a flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Well, try that in a small town. My point being, if you think those actions described are racist, it's because you think he is talking about people of color, which, just FYI, would make you the racist, not Aldean. The only thing that could be associated with people of color, or more specifically, the black community, whatever that is, would be the George Floyd riots. But then that is to concede the point that those were not peaceful protests at all, but were reflective of what Aldean was describing. And honestly, the only thing that made those riots connected to the black community was the fact that Floyd was a black man, and we were told that police officers everywhere are inherently racist, regardless of the color of their skin. But a good portion of the people that were burning down cities were a bunch of upper middle class white kids with no substance or meaning to their lives that were promised such by the commies in the Democratic Party. Now, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I'm not old either, which means I remember way back yonder, 3 years ago, when all this crap was going down. It would have been nice to have Aldean's song come out then, but it didn't. Anyone with half a brain, and that's saying something today, could clearly see what was going on. 3 years ago, it would have been a brave song to write and release, but it wasn't, because everyone would have said Aldean was contributing to all of this peacefulness. The fact of the matter is, everyone is brave after the fact, and conservatives always seem to be valiant defenders of American values after they have already surrendered them. Or rather, they speak out when there is a market for that sort of thing, which is generally too late, because they have things to conserve and whatnot. The godly troublemaker exists to shine the light of Christ in the eyes of the idols of our day. We are able to do this because we are entirely listener-supported, which makes us cancel-proof and beholden to none. Your gifts of any amount support godly troublemaking and enable us to cut straight in a crooked world. Thanks for your support. Now, don't get me wrong. I am thankful that people are finally fed up enough to speak out about old ladies getting carjacked and beat up. But the time to have spoken out about this was a long time ago. Very few people actually did anything or spoke out about the paid militia in the Democratic Party out of fear of being called a racist. I'm old enough to remember when they tried that in a small town, and nobody did anything. I've seen the memes of Kyle Rittenhouse and his AR with the caption, "I remember when they tried that in a small town." However, when that's the only example you have to pull from, and he is a child, we should all be very concerned. Something about being led by women and children and such. Not only that, but what the right touts as a victory regarding Rittenhouse, the left has been doing everything in their power to ensure that that never happens again. And just FYI, that city still burned. At the time, I lived outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, a small city on the west side of the state, a notoriously Dutch Reformed area who are notoriously ethnocentric, but feel bad about it. That coupled with a church that is about as upright and firm as soft serve ice cream, and that small city burned just like every other, and nobody did anything because they're so not racist. Try that in a small town, see how far you make it down the road. Round here, we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long. For you to find out, I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town. Every single possible line has already been crossed, though it is much harder on the front end to stand on principle because of the apparent cost. I promise you, it always costs more in the long run to react after the fact because of inconvenience or discomfort 3 years later. When you concede the principle, it's very hard to get it back, especially when you don't know what principles have been conceded in the first place. Conservatives' strength is also their biggest weakness, namely decentralization. The only way to overcome that is to be principally rooted in Christ. This is where the left finds its strength, not through Christ, but they are uniformly anti-Christ. This is the only thing that holds such divergent groups together. They are religiously motivated to the core. Conservatives don't know what they are trying to conserve anymore, and they look more like a Baskin Robbins, that is, 21 flavors. The church also doesn't know what they are trying to conserve anymore, let alone build, and they also look like a Baskin Robbins. Don't get me wrong, I would much rather live in a small town full of good old boys raised upright than the alternative of all the woke tartary. In fact, I now live in the deep south in a small town with a bunch of good old boys raised upright. And if a fight were to ever come, heaven forbid, I am much more comfortable living where I am now. However, if a fight does come, the only thing that will stand against the darkness of the religious behemoth of secularism is the light of Christ. I love my country, and I love every bit of Americana I can find. However, nostalgia and Americana is not going to stand against this beast, as we've already seen. As Aslan said to Jill in the silver chair, quote, "I have swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms." End quote. America belongs to Christ and Christ alone. And until we understand that, well, buckle up. Cheers.